right, I'm gonna turn it over to Sophie.
All right. So thank you everyone who is going to be joining us to present today. We have 6 AmeriCorps / Green Corps members who are going to be sharing a little bit about the projects they've been working on throughout their service terms. And yeah, so I think our structure will be, we'll hear from each person. And I'll just share the slides as we go, and you can just tell me when to advance your slides if you have more than one. And then afterwards, we can open it up for a little bit of questions and discussion just to make it flow. Yeah, so if you have questions as you're going, just keep them in your brain and we can circle back around once we've heard from everyone. So I will go ahead and all right, everyone can see my screen okay? Good. Okay, so I believe first up we have Hannah. So Hannah is joining us from the Washington Conservation District. So Hannah, I will pass it over to you.
All right. Well, like Sophie said, I'm a Climate Impact Corps member at the Washington Conservation District. The main project I've been working on is related to stormwater management and homeowners associations. So this kind of started out with a survey and focus groups in partnership with Wilder Research. And so they kind of facilitated the survey and focus groups and put together a report for us. And the key takeaways of that was there was a lack of engagement and understanding by HOAs. There were a lot of financial concerns, and then they wanted brief, digestible communications materials to kind of help educate them. So I've been working on developing educational materials. I am creating a fact sheet package for HOA leaders, which includes like 8 different fact sheets. And you can see on the right, this managing costs one is an example of those. And we are also compiling resources on the Washington Conservation District website. I haven't updated that yet with the new resources, but we will be doing that once they are finalized. And then I'm also planning a mini conference on May 31st at the Stillwater Library for HOA board members and property managers to come learn a little bit more. And you can go to the next slide. So aside from that, some additional projects I've been doing is some wildlife research, including opportunities for future turtle tunnels and community habitat protection. So I've created a couple story maps related to that and a flyer about wildlife. And then the rain garden cleanup event, it was supposed to be last weekend, but we had to reschedule due to rain, so that'll be this Saturday. And that's in partnership with Sustainable Stillwater and our Adopt a Rain Garden program. And then otherwise, I've been helping a lot with developing new communications materials or updating them. So I helped create a sign for pollinator gardens in a local community that got a Lawns to Legumes demonstration neighborhood grant. I'm working on a park project. So I created a poster of like the existing conditions. I've also been updating a variety of other fact sheets. So I guess that's kind of summary of what I've done, but feel free to ask questions or reach out later if you have any more.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Hannah. I feel like I have a lot of questions already, but we'll circle back around. It looks like you've been doing some awesome stuff. All right, we'll keep moving. So next up we have Becca, who is a Green Corps member with Metro Blooms. So Becca, I will turn it over to you.
Great. Thanks, Sophie. Good morning, everyone. So my name is Becca Kraske. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a Green Corps member at Metro Blooms in Minneapolis. And I have been supporting the education program at Metro Blooms, and specifically our Sustainable Land Care Training Program, which trains about 3 cohorts of 20 young people who live in the north side and south side green zones in Minneapolis in sustainable land care. And so we'll have 3 different cohorts of training this year. And participants in our first cohort will have the opportunity to opt into being part of our pilot mentor program, which I have gotten to help design. So we'll be matching up 10 participants of the sustainable land care training with mentors who keep up with them after the land care training to support them in career development, resumes, setting goals, thinking about how they could fit into the environmental field in the future, and really just kind of being someone with them, helping them brainstorm what they could do with the sustainable land care training that they received. And so I've been developing curriculum and plans for mentors and mentees, recruiting the mentors, and working on training materials and creating a handbook for them. And then we'll be having a mentor career panel as part of our sustainable land care training where mentees can meet the future mentors and kind of get a feel for them. And then I'll be supporting mentors and mentees as they develop their relationships. And this is a pretty short-term program. It's just 15 hours of meetings between mentors and mentees over the course of the summer, but we're hoping that it'll be pretty high impact by having them meet weekly for 7 weeks. And this is a pilot program and it's funded by Minneapolis Green Careers Exploration Program, but we're hoping that this can be a model for future years of the sustainable land care training as we're trying to think through how awesome it is that folks have access to this training, but how we can turn participating in the training into jobs and sustainable futures for our participants. So yeah, and then we're also just gathering data for next year and thinking about how this could be sustainable moving forward. So yeah, I'm happy to take questions. And also if this appeals to anybody and you would be interested in being a mentor, potentially, we're still seeking more mentors. So that's also an opportunity that I'm happy to talk more about. So thank you.
Cool. Thank you, Becca. All right, Lori, you are next up. So Lori is also serving with the Washington Conservation District along with Hannah. So yeah, Lori, it is all you. Whoop. There we go.
There you go. Thank you and good morning to everyone. One of the big projects I've been working on is a community asset map that we are a part of our service with the Climate Impact Corps. And one of the areas I've been working in is youth engagement, and a couple of areas for which I've actually been more directly involved other than just looking at resources is the Campus Greening Program, which is a collaboration with the South Washington Watershed District and the Washington County Schools, where they have a number of campuses that they have restored into either prairies or working. I think one has a little bit of an oak savanna. And so it also is a learning opportunity for the kids in those schools at the elementary and some of the middle schools. So I've been doing a little bit of work with that, looking at creating curriculum and learning experiences at Lake Middle School and Valley Crossing Elementary. And then had an opportunity to participate in the Metro Children's Water Festival this fall and continuing to participate in those activities. One of the big projects is the water quality education, which also is a part of the South Washington School District and the Watershed District, as well as Carpenter Nature Center, where we have been working in 3 of the middle schools to deliver water quality education, which is led by Abby Holden of Carpenter Nature Center. So we do 5 weeks of lessons with the kids, learning about what a watershed is, looking at, is it possible to filter storm water? And they do a great filtering activity where they learn how challenging it really is. And then we provide them with opportunities to look at abiotic and biotic measures of water quality. And then we eventually take them to the Carpenter Nature Center, Hastings campus, where they have an opportunity to put those skills in practice along the St. Croix or at the Carpenter Nature Pond. So it's really great and fun to watch those kids get all excited about the learning. And then I'm also working with the Ramsey Washington Metro Watershed District with the Woodbury Elementary rain gardens. They had rain gardens installed a number of years ago, and they need a little tender loving care. And so we have a 4th and 5th grade classroom that will be working to do some replanting in one of the rain gardens. And you can move on to the next slide. And then I've been just a variety of other little opportunities. Pollinators and plants is one that I've called. So working with the landfall demonstration neighborhood plantings helped in the fall, late summer, early fall, planting 4 of the garden areas. Worked with a pollinator planting at Lake Elmo Park Reserve, which was really fun. And then did a rare plant rescue in Hugo. I'm hoping that I did help save some of the rare plants. I'm not sure how successful I was in doing that. And then also I've been working with a community member with the gravel bed nursery in Scandia, which was a real eye opener in looking at planting trees into a gravel bed. And anytime now, that's what I'm going to look for, are gravel bed trees, because the root structure is just way awesome. Been involved in doing a few presentations with a train the trainer, looking at science on a shoestring, ways to bring learning about, for example, the natural and urban water cycle models in inexpensive ways. And then actually in collaboration with Hannah, we did a Bringing Life to Your Landscape planting for pollinators and wildlife in Oakdale. And then a couple of public events, the Spring Makers Market in Cottage Grove, the right at Matamidi, and then the event that I talked about at the beginning. Not everybody was yet joined, but the Grow Together Arts Art and Garden event, in which I'll be doing some a little bit of a soil clinic with participants, and hopefully we'll be able to recruit some community members to actually have their soil tested and sent to the U of M soil laboratory. And then we'll do some follow-up with those folks later to see how they want to use those results to look at improvements in their garden, yard, and lawn care.
Awesome. And Lori, did you say that event was this coming Saturday?
Yes, this coming Saturday down in St. Paul Park.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. A lot of awesome projects. All right, so next up, we have Thomas. And Thomas is serving with the city of Woodbury. So I will pass it off to you.
Yeah, so I'm a Green Corps member serving with the city of Woodbury, and I've mainly been working on water efficiency programming, more specifically developing a home water audit program that is designed to sort of target residential water use. You can jump to the next slide. So home water audit is just like an evaluation of water use at a single family level. So it involves going into the resident's house and checking like the flow rate on their faucets and shower heads, how many gallons per flush their toilets are getting. And we're also looking at water softeners. And in the summer, when we pick we're kicking off a second pilot phase very soon for the summer, and we will be adding an irrigation aspect as well. So going around a resident's yard and checking their sprinkler heads if they're like malfunctioning in any way, or if they're hitting like impervious surfaces. And the information that we gather from the audit, we try to convey back to the homeowner in a pretty easy to read communication handout or report. And then you can jump to the next slide. So the reports that we send back to the homeowners are broken up by the different like things that we looked at through the audit. So there's like a page for toilets, a page for their water softener, a page for their faucets, a page for their shower heads, and so on. And then they also get a title page that has like an efficiency score that scores how well their house did, along with a priority list of maybe more important improvements that they could do in the near future, and then future considerations. So things that will improve the water efficiency of their household, but aren't nearly as important. And we try to make sure all the sort of data that we get back is pretty personalized and relevant to that specific household, so that the recommendations we give are maybe more likely to actually see follow through. And then on each of these like different topic pages for the report, we also have links to further resources, whether that is linking them to like the EPA's Water Sense program, or to like a program specific to the city of Woodbury. And then I think I have one more slide. So the sort of program goals of this, it's first and foremost like an education and outreach program for residents. So a lot of the audit involves actually trying to have a conversation with the homeowner and talk to them about opportunities that are present within the city of Woodbury, or sort of nearby organizations. Sometimes, we talk to them about like the Washington Conservation District and things that they do, like free on-site consultation visits, stuff like that. And then there's obviously just the aspect of trying to decrease chloride use within the city. I've got a little graph there that shows that household softening is something like 44% of chloride in wastewater in Woodbury. This doesn't include like road salt, which would be a very high percentage. And then just trying to increase water efficiency. So, if we're able to have residents increase their water efficiency and decrease their overall water use, that's a pretty easy, there's a lot of like low hanging fruit there we can target. If someone has like really inefficient toilets or faucets or shower heads, that's a pretty easy fix and can lead to some good results. So yeah.
Thank you, Thomas. Awesome. Sounds like a really interesting project. All right, so next we have Angela, who is serving with the MPCA and the We Are Water Minnesota art exhibit. So I will turn it over to you, Angela.
Thank you, Sophie. Good morning, everyone. As Sophie said, my name is Angela Huguenin. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a Minnesota Green Corps member serving at the Pollution Control Agency, although the bulk of my service is with the We Are Water Minnesota program. So you can go ahead to the next slide, Sophie. Thank you. A little bit of background about We Are Water for those who don't know it, because that might be helpful context for speaking about my projects. This is in part a traveling exhibit, and so it goes to currently 5 communities per year. So it's been in 35 different communities throughout the state. And so far over 100,000 people have visited the exhibit since it began in 2016, which I think is really exciting. And I just want to acknowledge I'm a small kind of cog in this larger wheel, but I'm really grateful to get to be a small part of this project. And I will also note that every time the exhibit moves, there's a lot of local focus in what's covered and featured in the exhibit. And so it really seeks to highlight things that are happening in that community related to water. So it's really community focused, and the local hosts are kind of responsible for coordinating what they want the exhibit to focus on, what issues they want to highlight, and empower community members to get involved with. And so my role is kind of supporting those host sites as they're working on this. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment here. But these audio stories, this is what a lot of my service centers around. And so each time the exhibit moves, the local hosts also select anywhere between 12 to 15 local community members whose voices they want to highlight. And so as you can see in this background image, people who come to the exhibit have the option to actually listen to those audio stories. And that's kind of a neat way of centering those local voices as we talk about what's happening with water in a particular community. So then on the right-hand side, you can just see where the exhibit has been so far this year. It's been in Duluth so far. It's currently in the Mississippi River Sartell Watershed, but it'll be closer to the metro area pretty soon. In June, it'll be back in Chisago County. So go ahead to the next slide, Sophie. Thank you. So to focus a little more on what I in particular have been focusing on in my service, as I said, each time the exhibit moves, the content shifts to be more locally focused. So I come from more of a humanities background, actually, and less of the science side of things. So I'm really curious about sort of that storytelling element and how we make the science a little more digestible for the everyday exhibit visitor or someone who may be less familiar with the ins and outs of the water world. So I'm really grateful I have had opportunities to be involved in more of the research and writing of this information, hopefully in a way that's accessible for folks to take in. And so that's one element of it, working with those community partners to determine what they want to highlight in the content that we share, and kind of lifting up those interviews as well. There is an education and outreach component of my service. So part of what I do is the trainings for the volunteers who act as docents in the exhibit. So I kind of get them familiar with the themes of We Are Water, what's happening with this water throughout the state and then in their local community so that they can then engage with community members. And then there are also events like this is a photo on the bottom of the water bar, which is a really neat engagement opportunity some of you may be familiar with, but basically it's to spark conversation around drinking water, where it comes from, how we can protect it. So a variety of different events, and then sometimes that's also working directly with the host communities to figure out if they want to do supplementary workshops that I help facilitate, whether that's the Incredible Journey or other things in their community. And then what brought me here today actually is it's on the right-hand side, the podcast. I'm so grateful to Sophie and Anne and the Adopt a Drain team. I get to work with the audio stories that are taken by our audio contractor and then kind of make them into a slightly longer form podcast episode, basically. So I aim to do about 4 per host site. And in my most recent set, I was really trying to make those a little more digestible for someone who, again, may not have as much background in water. And so one of those podcast episodes was more focused on stormwater and storm drains. And so the Adopt a Drain team was really wonderful to give me resources I could kind of highlight. And those were then combined with some local stories from the Holding Ford community of people who do storm drain art. So I guess a lot of my role is kind of trying to take pieces from different communities and connect them and just be kind of a ripple in that greater work to make partnerships and build connections and build capacity in kind of the small way I can from my host site, but it's been really rewarding. And then there's also that Smart Salting logo up there. I do also facilitate the community leaders workshops and help with their educational materials. So it's kind of a wide variety of different things, but all sort of in the community engagement education space. So I'm grateful to be here. Thank you all. And I will also give a quick plug that if you are an organization that may be interested in hosting We Are Water, or you know someone who may be, those applications should be open by Memorial Day, and they'll probably be open through about mid-July, and that'll be for the coming host site cohort. So for what that's worth, if anyone's interested in that. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Sophie.
Thanks, Angela. And thank you for joining us today. And I highly recommend listening to the podcast. If you want, feel free to share the episode in the chat if you want, or just the podcast in general.
Thanks, Sophie. Will do.
All right. So Phil, you are next, and I believe Phil is our last person presenting. And Phil is serving with Great River Greening.
Hello, can you see? I just lit myself up there. Am I visible?
You are visible.
Okay, all right, can't tell. All right, welcome everybody. I'm serving with Great River Greening. We're a environmental nonprofit based in St. Paul. As the name suggests, so we had our origin in the Mississippi River Valley, restoring native ecosystems in the valley. And since then, we spread out. So we have really operations, a lot in Southeast Minnesota, but also we've spread out to different parts of the states. Again, focus on restoring native plant communities, trees to a large extent. Of course, that has a large bearing on water quality. So today I'm going to focus on a particular project that I spent much of the winter on. And the background for this is really greening's focus, especially in recent years, has been in making natural landscapes in Minnesota more resilient to climate change, so they can weather the coming storm and play a role in tempering the global effects of climate change. And much of our work is focused really in the urban forest in the metro area. We plant a lot of trees along boulevards and in parks and on private land. And we recognize, as everybody is really recognized in recent years, that urban forests have to adapt to climate change if they're going to continue to shade neighborhoods, absorb carbon emissions. And really what's involved in adaptation is we have to select tree species that are best suited to the conditions likely to prevail in coming decades. And that's just part of responsible stewardship of urban forests. So my report really summarizes the current scientific knowledge about the pace of anticipated warming in Southeast Minnesota. The focus is on the Twin Cities and the vulnerability of different tree species to heat, drought, flash flooding, all those effects we expect to come from climate change. It also kind of offers some lists, news you can use on based on forest adaptation research of trees that are likely candidates for planting, given the reality of climate change. And I also talked to a number of foresters, working foresters in a metro area, about how they go about selecting and cold testing climate-ready trees. And next slide, please, Sophie. So this is really what surprised me in researching this report is how rapidly the climate is forecast to change the rest of this century. And this is just one set of several sets of maps that I have in the report. But the USDA's Office of Sustainability projects marked shifts in plant cold hardiness and heat zones for the rest of the century in this state. And for those not familiar with heat zones, the American Horticultural Society has published maps showing heat zones and for different, really it does it for the whole country. I took maps for Minnesota. And so what this shows is the regions of the states in which average temperatures are going to exceed 86 degrees. How many days temperatures exceed 86 degrees? And then that's a key threshold for plants' health, because above that threshold, trees and other plants, they suffer. Their function is impaired. It's stressful for these trees to experience temperatures above 86 degrees. So we see from this map that it's really dramatic with the change in color. But according to the key there, by 2039, the metro area will experience 60 days in which temperatures exceed 86 degrees. And and that's that last figure there where everything's yellow. And to put that in perspective, that's about the number of heat days Missouri and Southern Illinois experience now. So essentially the map is saying toward the middle to the third quarter of this century, we're going to we'll have summer heats equivalent to Missouri and Southern Illinois. So get ready for that. Break out of sunscreen. Okay, next slide, please. And of course, we'll have the forecasts, and then these forecasts are based on work by climate scientists. I had email conversations with some scientists, so one in particular at the Northern Institute of Applied Climate Science, who have done quite a bit of research in Minnesota. And the forecast really call for hotter summers combined with potential drought extending late into the growing season. So it'll be perhaps more rain during the summer, but it's going to be more likely we'll have very dry falls, which puts further stress on trees in metro areas which are already under stress because they're in metro areas. So, but the flip side of that is because we have higher temperatures. Temperatures aren't as low during the winter, and generally milder winters are going to favor species native to cold hardiness zones 5 or 6. Now, metro area has just slipped into zone 5, so the metro area is already warming to zone 5. And these are some of the species on this slide, which the research shows, it's probably a good idea to start planting these species now, because these are the species that will do well 50, 60, 70 years from now. And a lot of these are kind of unfamiliar to people walking around parks and streets today, like American filbert, Chinquapin and shingle oak, sycamore, black tupelo. You don't see those because these trees are, today they're found really south of the Twin Cities. They're found in southeast Minnesota, Iowa, Illinois, Missouri. But there are foresters in the metro area, in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and some other cities are experimenting with these trees, planting them in small quantities to see how they do. So these are kind of seen as the trees of the future. Next slide, please. But of course, as we know, Twin City, the winters in the Twin Cities may be less severe than in the past, but they're still potentially deadly to trees. Talking to one forester, I found out about a little study in Minneapolis, where in 2018, 2019, which was a very cold winter, it's kind of known as kind of a polar vortex for those who experience it. But 60% of Minneapolis's London plane trees died in that winter. So when you have a cold snap, yes, you're going to lose trees. So the answer to that, the way you respond to that is you test these trees, kind of informally with tree trials, plant them in small batches, see how they do. And the species that do well, where you can plant more frequently and kind of work them into your mainstream tree planting program. And the entities listed here are some of the communities I talked to, nonprofits and agencies, which are in fact conducting these small tree trials and trying to work them into the regular planning programs. I talked to City of St. Paul, Hennepin County, Tree Trust. So we're doing it, and hopefully this is really the key to finding trees which are both cold hardy enough to plant now, but are suited to climatic conditions which we're going to see beyond my lifetime for sure, because I'm an older climate impact corps member. But so that's kind of just a brief look into my report. There's a whole bunch more there which I haven't shared, but hopefully that gives you a sense of what I found in writing this report. And that's all I have.
Thank you so much. Yeah, what a really interesting project. Well, I believe that wraps it up for our presenters. So thank you all so much for taking the time to join us and tell us about your projects. And I think when we came up with this idea, it was as a way to, of course, hear about the projects you're working on, but also serve as kind of a way to network and meet each other. And so, yeah, if any of you all who presented want to be connected to anyone here, I'm sure Anna and I can serve as messengers and connect y'all. So yeah, but I think we can probably open it up for questions from our presenters. So yeah.
Bill, mine isn't, this is Chris Meyer from Freshwater. Mine is an easy question, I think. I was just looking up some of the trees that you listed, and I looked up the American filbert, and American hazelnut came up. Are they the same tree, or is hazelnut a bush?
The American filbert is the same as the American hazelnut. Yeah,
okay.
It's the same species. Yeah, you find both names. There's also,
because,
yeah.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I would say that there's also the Turkish hazelnut And that's different. But the American hazelnut is the same as American filbert. Yeah.
And is that the tree that's being promoted as one of the crop trees when people are doing, you know, plantings, multi-level plantings for different projects, you know, where it's one of the promoted harvested crops happening, you know, from the U of M and things like that. Do you know anything about that?
Well, American filbert is a smaller tree because it is hazelnut, so it would fit in as an understory tree, kind of under the larger climax trees. But again, you don't see many of them because a lot of them are still in trials. Actually, some Turkish hazelnut, they bit the dust in recent winters, so that's really a story in progress. So which ones are going to make it? But experimentations are going on with both American hazelnut and Turkish hazelnut as park and street trees.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I have a question for Thomas. I'm curious about the like behavior change aspect of the project you're working on, because I think a lot of us, especially on the Adopt a Drain team, are always thinking about behavior change and what that looks like. And I'm curious if there are any takeaways that you have found as far as like the messaging and graphics and different cues and stuff that help with that aspect.
Yeah, we did a sort of smaller pilot phase in the winter that only involved about 7 homes, and we're planning to do like a much larger one in the summer, aiming for something like 4 dozen. And we had pretty positive feedback from our participants in the first phase, and one individual had like switched out or made a change to their water softener settings, and then was like switching out their toilets already. And 2 other individuals indicated, like someone else said that they would change their water softener, and someone else indicated that they would be looking at like better toilets. So I think being able to sort of highlight like, well, how they can improve in pretty easy ways helps a lot. And then like for the toilet specifically, Woodbury has like a rebate program for that currently running right now. So that helps out a lot as well in just the decision-making process on the homeowner's end.
Interesting.
I wanted to piggyback because I really liked, it looked like the handouts or the graphics that you had. And I'm wondering except it was teeny tiny on the slide. And I'm wondering if you can send them around or share them bigger, because it looked like there was a cool kind of gradient of red, orange, yellow, green to show where people fell along the line, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, I made the templates just in Canva, but the gradient I made in like an Excel just spreadsheet, and then applied like a gradient over, and then just attached numbers to it, and then just uploaded like an image of that to Canva. But I can maybe put the template sort of in the chat. I don't know how possible that is, but maybe.
I have a follow-up too on some of the questions. You did answer one about the rebates for the toilets, and just thinking about in behavior change, not only suggesting changes, but providing a pathway to change with the rebates seems to be really effective. I'm curious, who goes out to do those audits? Was it just you? Is there staff dedicated in Woodbury to keep this program running, or what's the idea of the longer range sustainability of this effort?
Yeah, so currently for the first pilot phase, it was me, and then I was accompanied by a city staff member from our environmental division. And then in the summer, it'll be me, and we have an environmental intern for the summer. So they will be accompanying me on the audits. Some of just like the measurements require 2 people. And then long-term wise, I'm making like a train the trainer type manual to accompany the program. So if the city wants to run it in the future and they want to run it in like the summer and they have an intern during that time frame, they don't have to start from scratch and they're able to get the program up and running again pretty easily. And then I guess also like sort of looking long term, a big benefit of this program is just collecting baseline data for the city to inform future programming. You know, if we look at something like a water softener optimization program in the future, well, now we have this collection of data on how they're already programmed in residents' homes and what they'll look like sort of going into the program.
Great answer. Thank you.
Yeah.
If I could add, this is Kristen from Woodbury. Thomas agreed, great answer, and everyone did a great job presenting. But part of the home water audit pilot that we're doing now with Thomas through the Green Corps program came out of a survey that the city led to residents who had participated and had chosen not to participate in our other efficiency programs. And one of the big takeaways was that residents want to do the thing, but there's just like too many details. If you look at owning a house, of your irrigation system, your landscaping, your water softener, your toilets, your sinks, like on and on. So this idea, clearly stolen from Home Energy Squad approach in concept, was to address that and see, is this the service the city can provide by having somebody review everything and say, here's our recommendations of what you should do, and kind of give that focus, in addition to the support of our existing and future programs for cost share and incentives to help residents make those changes. So excited to see where it goes, and we'll definitely be able to share more information as we further develop it.
I have a,
oh, sorry. I have another
Go ahead,
question,
Chris.
just for Hannah. Hannah, you were doing the homeowners associations, correct? With Washington County. Yeah. I'm just wondering about some of those, the availability of some of those materials and guidelines for the rest of us to adopt and adapt in other districts.
Yeah, so well, the fact sheets I'm working on finishing up, and then we're going to hopefully get some feedback from HOA leaders and property managers at our conference, and then after that I'm planning on finalizing them and sharing them out.
They looked awesome. Just kudos to you for
Thanks.
I had a question for Angela about the exhibit that you do when you're making the community stories. Are you going out and interview or developing those, or are they coming from the partners or the host sites, or how are you getting connected with the people?
That is a wonderful question. And the process has been in place for a while, so I'm kind of peripheral but somewhat involved. But basically, the host sites, so the local hosting group. So for example, right now it's in Holdingford, and so Stearns County Soil and Water, as well as an art center in Holdingford. They are the primary partners for the current hosting group. So they are in the community and they know the people they want to connect with. So they kind of come up with a list of storytellers they'd like to highlight. And then I didn't mention in much depth, but We Are Water is also a partnership with 8 state agencies, including the Minnesota Humanities Center. And so they have someone who's on contract who does the physical interviews and kind of goes around the state. And then we get that content, and our team kind of does development of that and selecting snippets that we want to highlight in the exhibit, and then further development for the podcast and figuring out how that's going to be sort of displayed and explained in the exhibit, if that makes sense. So it's kind of a lot of cooks in the kitchen, but we all sort of have our different little roles and then, pass it on. And I hope that answers it, but that's sort of the setup. And we kind of, consider that the local folks are really the experts on what's happening with water in their area. So they're the ones who select the storytellers, and sometimes they work in water in some way, and sometimes they not just, but are people who, grew up fishing or are really into kayaking or something of that sort. So they're sort of tasked with finding a diverse group of storytellers, and we go from there.
Thanks. I also have a question for Lori. You mentioned about the gravel bed plantings and the root structure. I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit more about that.
Sure. Well, it was really interesting having bought trees from, you know, a what I would call a regular nursery like Gerton's or someplace like that. They either come in the containers or, you know, they're burlap wrapped, and you usually end up having to cut the container and the roots are really bound and tight and maybe mixed in some soil, and you end up slicing the roots. And then the same thing with the burlap. Whereas in the gravel bed nursery, you take the bare root tree, plant it into the gravel bed, and it sits over the summertime. And then in the fall, we pulled the trees out for the people who purchased the trees. And when they come out, of course, because there is no soil in the gravel, you just have these roots, and they have a nice structure. They grow through the width and the length, and they just look so much easier to plant. Now, they were a pain to pull out of the gravel because it was amazing how, that you didn't just get the main roots, you also got the ancillary roots. And so it was really awesome. And it looked like a much more natural structure for the tree when then you transplant it into soil.
Thank you.
And I will add this over the additional information. This is Phil from Great River Greening. Great River Greening works with some local partners, neighborhood organizations in St. Paul, and one is Frogtown Green, which is active in Frogtown, neighborhood in St. Paul, and they maintain their own gravel beds. They have their own programs for distributing trees, and actually they receive the trees in the spring, so they're getting them now, and they're going to go into gravel beds and sit there for a while and have those root systems grow, and then they'll be planted later in the summer and in the fall. So it's quite a increasingly common practice to use gravel beds for bare root trees rather than just sticking them in the ground from the nursery.
I have a question for Becca. I'm interested in the mentor-mentee program you were talking about, and maybe if you could share a little bit more about that. And it sounds like that's something that we could potentially get involved with if interested. And yeah, if so, how do we do that?
Yeah, so we've been recruiting mentors who work in the environmental field broadly, and even also just in communities and are already maybe doing mentorship or working with young adults. Our participants are mostly 18 to 24-year-old young adults from environmental justice areas in North and South Minneapolis. And so we've been trying to find mentors who are familiar with the communities, but also have experience doing their own career development, doing job interviews, planning for the future, thinking about education and goal setting, and just kind of like how to go about thinking about your future. And so we are in the process right now. We've just a couple of weeks ago started reaching out to find mentors, and the process will be that mentors will start in early July, meeting with mentees about once a week for about 2 hours a week for the course of the summer, about 15 hours of sessions total. And we're paying mentees to participate, which is really awesome. And we also have some career development funds for them to figure out how to spend $250 towards career development activities like conferences or work materials. Yeah, and so if anyone is interested in potentially being a mentor or would just like to be in the loop for the future, we have a list going of folks who weren't able to participate this year but would be interested for next year too. And we're just trying to think about how to get young adults, specifically from environmental justice areas of the Twin Cities, into green infrastructure jobs. The Sustainable Land Care training focuses on green stormwater infrastructure mainly, thinking about maintenance, especially as an area that Metro Blooms has been focusing on, is green stormwater maintenance, because there seems to be so much focus on installation, and then things get full of weeds and sediment, and there's so much need for a skilled workforce that knows what they're doing to identify native plants and to maintain green stormwater infrastructure. So yeah, does that help answer your question?
Yeah, thank you so much.
Becca, I have a follow-up to that too. You mentioned that you're developing materials for the mentorship program for the mentors and mentees to use this summer. are you focusing on soft skills as opposed to hard skills, assuming that they've learned their hard skills through their previous experience? And could you just give kind of a short list of where you think that focus is in this program?
Yeah, so the hard skills are mostly being developed in the training, stuff like identifying native and invasive plants and doing stormwater maintenance. And in this program, it's a lot more focused on soft skills like setting goals, developing a resume, searching for jobs, practicing job interviews, practicing informational interviews. We're hoping that folks can do either like a site visit, depending on who their mentor is, to like go visit their workplace or go on a field trip somewhere else. Trying to think about how they could fit in where their interests lie, and also think about education as a possibility too, depending on what someone is interested in, thinking about what potential future education opportunities would make sense for them as well. So I made a handbook that's about 30 pages long of trying to lay out, every meeting that the mentors and mentees have together. The first session, they're talking about goals. What do they want to do with their time together? The next one, they're working on resumes, and trying to go through that process together. And if someone is like gung-ho about applying for jobs, then that's also something that we're encouraging mentors and mentees to work on, truly like job applications together. And what does that process feel like? How do you go about it? How do you maintain your sanity as you're in the process of waiting for resumes or for interviews to come back? So, yeah.
Good. Thank you. Thanks for that.
I have one more question. I don't want to be taking space from anyone else, but Hannah, I was curious about when you mentioned like planning the like mini conference, and I like that idea a lot, and I'm curious how that idea came about and what that process was like planning it. And
Well, I think the idea itself was Angie's idea, but planning it, I guess we're doing like a 2-hour conference, so kind of short with a couple sessions on a Friday morning, in hopes that people either can take a little bit of time off, or a lot of like retired folks are the board members of HOAs as well, so they'd have more availability. But we're kind of doing a smaller format conference, kind of just to see how it goes, but this could be something that grows into a larger thing in the future, depending on how it's received.
Actually Karen Kill's idea. Karen Kill is the administrator for Browns Creek Watershed District.
Okay.
But it seems like people who were in the focus groups had. Oh, okay. So I should back up. The majority of people in the HOAs, our surveys and such showed that they really don't care. I mean, to be perfectly blunt, they're not budgeting for stormwater maintenance. They don't really care about stormwater maintenance. It's not a priority for them. But the group that participated in the focus groups, they were like, hey, we'd love to be able to network and learn with one another. So hence it being more of a mini conference. It's like, for those of you who care, let's provide an opportunity for you to not feel like you're a lone voice in the wilderness. But yeah, Hannah's done, I mean, yeah, it's pretty cool. We are equally excited to see this fact sheet package when it's ready, and to get the feedback from the people who are the direct audience on, if this meets their education needs.
So are these folks, Hannah and or Angie, are these folks people who live in a association and are just interested in water issues, or are they actually, like you mentioned, board members? So they're people who are controlling how the homeowner association makes its decisions. Is that right?
Yeah.
Happen to live there too, right?
Yeah, I mean, the content's kind of more directed towards people who are able to make decisions, but I mean, HOA residents are welcome to come, and I mean, I'm sure the information is still interesting to those who are actually very interested in stormwater and can maybe help persuade their boards to make different decisions.
Thanks.
And I have a request from Anna. If the presenters would mind sharing contact info, and then people can ask follow-up questions or connect in various ways. So yeah, maybe the easiest way is just to share your email in the chat. Thanks, Becca, for sharing that. But yeah, thanks, Anna. That's a great idea.
Do we need to realize that that the Green Corps service ends in the fall? So these emails are effective if they're with your work only until the fall, right? Just so people know.
That's a good point. Thank you.
Well, thanks again to everybody for presenting and sharing your work. And I do encourage everyone to reach out if you have any additional questions for any of our presenters. Find out more about that.
Babies too.
So at this point, I am going to go ahead and turn off the recording.